Florida can be contagious. When somebody that you know moves to Florida, and maybe it was always your dream to move to Florida, and they beat you to it, maybe it's your brother or sister or a neighbor or somebody that you're close to, and you as a couple and they as a couple always talked when you were playing Pinochle about moving to Florida and how much fun it would be if you were all there together playing Pinochle on the lanai in the sunshine. Lo and behold, they were able to make that dream come true before you did. They're living in Florida and you are not. In fact, you are shoveling snow, kind of living vicariously through their Facebook and all the things that they're doing that seems to be really, really fun. And you feel a little bit of FOMO. You feel a little bit of fear of missing out, and it gives you that sort of depression feeling. You know, they say there's something called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, where you feel down in the dumps when you don't have enough sunshine. Sometimes you can feel a little bit of that. Well, in today's video, we are not going to be talking about brochure living in Florida. I say this often on my channel. On this channel, I like to balance things out a little bit for you because you can get the brochure living anywhere, any channel, any Google search will tell you all the good things about Florida. But I feel like in order to make a good decision, you do have to have things balanced out a little bit because everything isn't perfect. That's not reality. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about several things that your friends, your lonely Florida friends, will not tell you, but I will. All right, number one, they are not going to tell you that they don't go to the beach as often as they thought they would. Maybe for the first 6 months or so, they were going to the beach all the time. Every day was a beach day. Every weekend was a beach weekend. They loved seashell hunting, walking on the beach in the evening. They loved it. Why? Because it was new to them. They moved from, let's say, Chicago, Illinois, and it was always their dream to be able to walk on the beach every night. But it gets old. You know, it gets old. I bet at one point in time, Chicago was a great place for them as well, that they thought about all the shopping and the restaurants and the people watching, and then it got old and they were looking for something a little different. Well, what can happen in Florida, especially as it relates to the beach, is that there's such a draw to wanting that thing that you don't have access to, but then you do it a couple, 2-3 times, or you do that for 6 months, and then you just don't go to the beach that often. I can tell you, in 5 years, I've probably been to the beach 3 times. That's just what happens. You just don't find yourself going that often. And also, you realize that after it rains, which it rains a lot in Florida, after it rains, the bugs come out of the sand, and you don't want to be on the sand when it's wet like that because you're going to get bit by everything. So, and then also there's times where the traffic is unbearable, and during season you can't find a parking spot. Bonita Beach is one that there's just absolutely nowhere to park. Fort Myers Beach, absolutely near impossible to even get on the island. So it really, that whole beach thing, it sounds great in your mind, but people just don't go that often when they live there. Number 2, people stop visiting you. They're definitely not going to tell you that people will stop visiting you. And one of the mistakes, and I've talked about this in a video recently, one of the mistakes people make is they buy a home kind of similarly to how they live in their home state. So you live in Michigan and you've got 7 grandkids and you have 4 kids and all these people around, but you have to remember when you move to Florida, they're probably going to visit for the first year, but after that, people just stop visiting, and you have overextended yourself to furnish and maintain a 4-bedroom home with 4 bathrooms that are just empty rooms. So sometimes people just feel like there's chairs everywhere. You know, they deck out their lanai for all these guests that they think they're going to have, and they put a outdoor theater room and a gigantic barbecue facility outside. And the truth is, for the first year, people, they show up because they want to see how grandma and grandpa are living. But after that, they just stop showing up. And sometimes you're lucky to get guests after the 3rd year. You're lucky if you have anybody showing up once a year. What ends up happening is you are going back to your hometown constantly because the grandkids, the relatives have their own lives. They have their own work schedules. They have their own soccer games, their own dance recitals. You're missing them all because you can't keep getting on and off planes, and they're just not coming to visit as often as maybe you thought. You have to have 2 Keurig machines. You have to have maybe 2 sets of summer clothes. You have to have 2 bikes that you ride because you love to ride your bike when you're back home in Connecticut. You have to have 2 of everything. Your favorite crock pot that you use when everybody comes over when you're in Connecticut, your hometown, then you've got to have that because that's what you like to cook with in Florida. Your favorite pots and pans. You have to have 2 of everything. Now you might think, well, it's not a big deal. I'll just bring it back and forth. But what ends up happening is you forget things. And when you leave your favorite food processor in your home state, and then you don't have it for 6 months out of the year in Florida, you feel inclined to just go ahead and buy it. And if and when you ever have to eliminate one of those houses, you have an entire household to get rid of because you have bought things twice. Number 4, flights can be very expensive. When you want to go back and forth because it's Christmas time and you don't want to spend Christmas alone in Florida, when you don't want to miss the birthday party, going back and forth, one, on short notice, or secondly, during season is very expensive. And depending on where you live and where you're trying to get to, like I'll just use an example, the Panhandle. Depending on where you are in the Panhandle, it's very difficult to fly in and out and get to places easily. Like direct flights are definitely a challenge. Sometimes it feels like planes, trains, and automobiles just to get to where you want to be to visit your friends or relatives. So in theory, you might think, well, it's no big deal, just hop a plane. But when you really try to do that, and especially as you age, it gets harder and harder to do that. Number 5, you may miss the 4 seasons. Now, I know that when you're ready to move, and if you're in that first year of living in Florida, you're probably really, really happy when you're seeing it on Facebook and everybody's shoveling snow and digging out of ice storms and you are not. You're swimming. That feels really, really good. But as a couple, 2-3 years pass and you start to get nostalgic about the Christmas tree and the cold and the hot cocoa and the fireplace and the cozy and people coming over and stomping their feet on your front porch and getting the snow out of there and the grandkids out front building an igloo and doing snow angels, you just don't have that anymore, and it does not feel the same. You can have a tendency to miss that. You can have a tendency to miss the fall when everybody's getting out. It's pumpkin spice season and I can't wait for hoodie weather, and you're like, yeah, it's hot here. It's still hot here. That can get a little bit old. When your seasons in Florida are hot and hotter, that can get old. And on that note, the heat and the humidity is real. It is real. If you're from the Northeast, it's going to be suffocating. Can I use that word? It is going to be suffocating for you. It is hot. That cool breeze that you get, especially in the Northeast, you don't have that at all. It's like the reptile house at the zoo. It is like a sauna in the summer months. Unbearably hot, the kind of heat that you cannot get away from. Now, is there air conditioning? Of course there is, and you can go inside and get air conditioned. But if you're living in an older home, let's say you wanted to be close to the beach and you bought a house that was built in the 1970s and there is not enough insulation in it because remember that heat, the sun, the roof, it's going to come right down into your house. So if you're in an older home like that, or if you don't have impact resistant doors and windows, maybe you have single hung windows, which is common in Florida, that heat is going to penetrate through, and it's going to be hard to get your AC to keep up. That's very common in the summer months, especially in an older home. The air conditioner just cannot keep up. Your friends that move to Florida are not going to tell you how bad the healthcare is. And you know, the thing is, the reason they're not going to tell you all these things is because they want you there. They don't want to feel lonely all the time. They would like nothing more than for you to move there, and then they can still have that pinochle game with you. They won't be the only ones there by themselves. But that's one thing that people really don't realize. The healthcare is rough. There aren't many places in Florida that have great healthcare. And you might think, well, you know what? I'm 2 hours away from Tampa General. I'll just drive there. Really? If you're having a heart attack? You know, it's just not plausible to think you can always do that. If you live on an island somewhere, or you live in an area where there's 3 or 4 hospitals close by, but none of them have a good reputation. I mean, everybody kind of knows that NCH, the nickname is Never Come Home, unfortunately, but it's sort of like it's the first thing you learn when you get off the airplane at RSW is NCH, stands for Never Come Home. I mean, that's rough. If you're in a serious crisis and you don't have any faith in the healthcare, and it's not just imagined, everybody has a story about something that went wrong. I mean, I've shared with you on this channel many times that I've been given the wrong prescription 3 times in total. It just doesn't make you feel very good. So that's one of those things that I always mention, that if you're going to move to Florida, make sure that you're moving to an area where you're comfortable with the healthcare. So those are several things that your lonely friends will not tell you in Florida. And you know, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but all of those things that I'm telling you, they are actually real phenomena that happen in Florida when people kind of buy the dream and they don't look at the other side of living and make sure that they're balanced out in their expectations.